Welcome to the True Health Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Scarlett, board certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, business owner, and the woman other high performing women call when they're burnt out, stuck in survival mode, and ready to get back their life. If you've been told by your doctor that everything looks normal, but you know something's off, if your energy is tanking, your focus is scattered, and your body feels like it's working against you, if you're craving more capacity to lead, to scale, to show up fully in your business and for your family, this is the podcast you've been looking for. Every week, I bring you the real conversations doctors aren't having with you, from the truth about your hormones and metabolism to the deeper root causes stealing your energy. I'll share success stories from women who've completely turned things around and give you the tools and insights I use with my private clients. This season, I'm also sitting down with powerhouse women, CEOs, founders, and leaders who have made their health the foundation of their success. These are the conversations that change lives. So if you want real answers, more capacity, and the kind of results that ripple into every part of your life and business, you're in the right place. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me today. I am looking forward to this conversation so much, not only for my own knowledge, but I know that what we are about to speak about is controversial. It is taboo for a lot of women. And I really want you, or hope that you just kind of open the doors to it being a little bit more accepted, um, just less stigma around this topic. And I'm going to let you introduce it. And I want you to tell us, I want us to start a little bit with your story in this journey.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, Michelle. I love getting to chat with other FDN. So I'm so thrilled to be here. And this is a topic, of course, that is near and dear to my heart. And if, you know me, I don't shy away from hard topics. Like I talk about, my journey with alcohol. I talk about breast implant illness. Like I believe that women need to be educated and heard on some of the things that they feel like are taboo, but really when you start talking about them aren't necessarily taboo, and peptides are definitely one of those things. So in short, my peptide journey started almost 9 months ago when I was working with a coach who was trying to get me to follow a keto diet. And I was pushing against her, like, oh, I just can't do it. Like I'm just hungry all the time. I just want sweets. And finally she's like, Jennifer, I feel like your issue might be a little bit deeper. So maybe you want to do a trial of a GLP-1 compounded with a GIP. We did have a discussion that, my really like my childhood issue of bulimia was coming up again. I thought the more I restrict my diet, the more I am, apt to have these binging and purging desires. And I don't want those. Like through my FDN lifestyle, those are pretty much well controlled. Through cutting out alcohol, they're pretty much well controlled. But I was starting to get this, just this thought process of this happening again. I was like, I don't want to go down that path. And so my coach, Sonia, said, Jennifer, this has been very helpful for me with regard to food noise and that constant thinking about food. She said, you might be a good candidate. And I thought, no way. I'm not cheating. I'm not doing peptides. Like, how dare you ask me? Like, I do it all naturally. And then the more I thought about it, and the more I was struggling with these like mental and physical urges, the more I thought maybe I could be more open-minded. And as a, researcher and clinician, I mean, I'm a big nerd, my master's in integrative nutrition. Give me a good research paper any day of the week. So I started diving into the literature and seeing, not only was this class of peptides, have some pretty amazing longevity. I mean, people have been using particularly GLP-1 since, the 1980s, but they're very effective for not just weight loss and food noise, but a whole host of other issues like inflammation, gut health, mental and physical cravings, not just regarding food, that my world started to open up and I became more open-minded to the idea of, maybe I couldn't do it all by myself 100% naturally. Maybe there was a little bit of help there for me and I had to be humble enough to accept it. And once I started, my peptide journey and I was like, okay, let's do it. I felt very supported with my coach and very, very confident in the literature. And almost immediately I started feeling better. I did start my peptide journey with a GLP-1, GIP. We could talk about what that means. But since then, over the last 9 months, now my stack has evolved to, 4 peptides a week. I'll say it's not cheap, but it's very effective. And I'm feeling better than I felt in my 20s or 30s. So I'm just excited to get to talk about it because I feel like other women can have a very similar experience and that can be encouraging, especially in midlife.
Wow. I mean, where do we even begin?
I know.
This is incredible. Okay, so let's talk about GLP-1
Mhm.
specifically.
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't know much about this, so I'm going to be asking questions like truly like what your clients would be asking. GLP-1 versus Ozempic.
Hmm.
Something about the word Ozempic
I know.
is like kind of dirty. I don't know
Totally.
what it is, right? You're kind of
Hmm.
like, if somebody were to say, like, I'm on Ozempic, there's like judgment passed. But if somebody
Sure.
were to say, I'm taking GLP-1s, people are like, what's that?
Oh, you're fancy. Okay.
Yeah, like, what is that? So I would love
Yes.
to talk very specifically about GLP-1s or like very specifically
Mhm.
about the peptides that you're on,
Yes.
and versus the sort of pharma brand.
Absolutely. I think to do that, we need to dive into the history of GLP-1s just very briefly. All right.
Sure.
So, GLP-1s as a class, this is glucagon like peptide. So, the action in the body is twofold. One, it delays gastric emptying. So, food truly does sit in your stomach a little bit longer. You feel fuller longer physically because food is not digested as quickly. Now, I used to think this is a really big problem. It's not necessarily, it's not like digestion is majorly impacted. You really just feel fuller longer. There's also this component of working on the brain, working on the hypothalamus um, to send the correct fullness signals to the body, all right, and to the brain. So leptin and blood glucose, insulin are all impacted when you're on a GLP-1, and this is what helps the body lose weight, right? When you add in a GIP, there's more of the brain activity, the hypothalamic activity that's impacted. So truly, you just desire less food. You desire less alcohol. There are studies that show you desire less gambling or shopping, just by nature of not being as maybe impacted by those cravings or urges. It's really fascinating. So anyway, that's the class of GLP-1s. Now they've been in use, like I said, since the 1980s. Doctors have been using these drugs for type 2 diabetes. They
Right.
found that lowering hemoglobin A1C, lowering blood glucose, helping their patients become more insulin sensitive was absolutely something that these GLP-1s did, with the side effect of losing massive amounts of weight. And so eventually, researchers and clinicians started to glom onto this and write these drugs off label. But the earlier iterations of the GLP-1 class, like liraglutide, had to be dosed every single day. So you had to inject yourself with this peptide every single day, and that was hard for people. However,
Sure.
the weight loss was happening. Around 2005, doctors started using semaglutide, one of the next iterations of the GLP-1s. We went from liraglutide commercially to semaglutide, and this is Ozempic. So this is when people started, realizing, gosh, this trade name drug is helping people lose large amounts of weight. 2005, it wasn't necessarily blowing up yet, but doctors were using it off label for weight loss and it was working. And so, right around 2018, we were introduced to this commercially introduced to this newer class of GLP-1s. Tirzepatide is the name of this class, and it's a GLP-1 compounded with a GIP. So now we have two distinct mechanism of actions that the peptide can use on the body and the brain to really increase fat loss while preserving muscle mass. And that's kind of the delineation and the difference between tirzepatide and then semaglutide. Now, here's the problem with semaglutide, which is Ozempic. That's the trade name, Ozempic, right? Is when people started using this drug, they're using it for type 2 diabetics. And when you think about, kind of the lifestyle, not everyone, but the basic lifestyle of someone who's eventually going to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, you've got some metabolic syndrome going on, you've got weight gain going on. It's not general generally a very healthy class of people, right? So maybe they're eating more fast food or drinking more coffee or alcohol or not exercising, a lot. And of course, that's not everyone, but just that tends to be some of the lifestyle symptoms that will lead to someone acquiring type 2 diabetes. And so layering on Ozempic or semaglutide and shutting off someone's appetite at these higher physiological doses for someone who's already not eating well and not exercising and maybe doesn't have their hormones in balance and maybe doesn't have their minerals in balance, we did tend to see a lot of what we call dumpster fire activity where people got really sick or they lost a lot of body mass because they weren't eating enough protein and they weren't
Right.
exercising and they weren't lifting weights. And so we really started to see kind of a bad name with Ozempic because people were not using it in a way that optimized a lifestyle. They were just using it to shut their appetite off and lose weight. And this is more like my theory, in what I've read
Yeah.
and what I've gathered, but that's kind of my answer to the question when a lot of people ask me, don't you just lose a lot of muscle mass? And won't your skin get saggy on, these GLP-1s? And my answer is, yeah, that can absolutely happen if you're not living an optimized lifestyle. So I think that's some of the stigma, Michelle, that was associated with Ozempic and semaglutide, but this newer class of tirzepatide, especially for people in the wellness space who are already living, a relatively optimized lifestyle, making sure that yes, there's some fat loss, but we're preserving muscle or even building more muscle. I think that the tide is starting to shift and people are seeing that this actually could be a step toward, wellness instead of just like, weight loss.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I'm going to summarize what you said to
Mhm.
make it like maybe a little easier to digest. And you can tell me if I am totally wrong here, because you did speak a lot of science. So what we know is Ozempic, turning off your appetite, typically used for type 2 diabetic patients,
Yep.
potentially people looking for a quick fix.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm not trying to label all people in that way, just the same way you weren't just like, let's just open the door that idea that quick fixes are still very popular with a lot of the population.
Mhm.
But if you're taking them in maybe this compounded way in this new class with this idea of wellness in mind, and then thinking about what you and I do for a living in terms of helping people create this optimal lifestyle through diet and exercise and rest, and helping to mitigate imbalances in the body and just live more metabolically optimal, doing that actually makes it more effective and reduces risk of side effect. Am I
Absolutely.
right?
You're 100% spot on. In a nutshell, that's it. Yes.
Wow, that's innovative
Hmm.
and very exciting and very
Right.
exciting for like people like you and I who
Mhm.
could potentially, help people optimize their lifestyle, but then like more easily give them this body that they have desired for so long, and not to mention that becomes so much more difficult come midlife.
You can say that again, my friend. Yes. And of course, I am a midlife woman. And so, I wouldn't say I am outwardly looking for a quick fix because I've done this for 20 years, but there's always that little, thought inside like maybe this could make it a little easier. I'm working my tail off here, to make sure that my lifestyle is supporting the health that I want to achieve. And sometimes it just feels like I'm spinning my wheels with regards to maybe energy or specifically inflammation or even those like 5 to 15 pounds of midlife, weight gain, particularly around the belly. It does become disheartening for even us as practitioners. So I can only imagine what it's like for clients who maybe don't have like the depth or breadth of knowledge or the ability to maybe do as many things as we can as like health practitioners. Like I build it into my day that I get to work out and do my steps. Like it's part of, my job almost. But, for women who are in an office all day or caring for aging parents or still have young kids at home and just maybe can't do all of those things, this is a really nice adjunct to someone who is at least trying to like get their protein and their minerals and their steps and their sun.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I want to come back. I want to pin the midlife conversation because that's definitely what
Sure.
I want to talk about. But I want to ask you from a practitioner standpoint. You
Mhm.
said that the GLP-1 it slows gastric emptying,
Hmm.
which ultimately makes you feel fuller longer, which helps to sustain your appetite, or I guess reduce your appetite,
Hmm.
but sustain feeling full and you don't overeat. From a practitioner standpoint, and you said it was minimal, but I'm curious to know what about bacteria overgrowth in the intestines? Like if what if it's sitting in there for longer than this
Love
is
it.
true? Okay, science.
Yes, yes. You're the first person to ask me that question. So it's a great question. Obviously, if you have slow gut motility anyways, right? And you've got something presenting like SIBO, right? Like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and food continues to sit there. Keep in mind too, the food is sitting in your stomach longer, not necessarily your small intestine or your large intestine, right?
Okay.
It's just going to be digested a little bit slower. And when we say slower, I don't have a number, I don't know if it's like an hour or 2 hours. There's also not a huge feeling of being like overly full as long as you're, eating well, right? Side note, we find that you can't eat a lot of fat when you're on a GLP-1, so you automatically lean toward a leaner diet, right? So more lean protein, more fruits and vegetables tends to be more easily digested and tolerated when you're on some of these GLP-1s. So like I said, can't tell you like the amount of time that food stays in your stomach longer. I also don't know any research or really any case studies like showing that it increases, the incidence or presence of SIBO. But I could see how that would be uncomfortable, for someone who's already struggling with, maybe a gut infection. This is why we like to test and not guess, though. Like run a GI map, figure out, do you have some bacteria in your small intestine that should not be there? Can you clear that out first? Like that's a big thing that I talk about in my social media. You've got to optimize your health before you layer this in, or you will be a dumpster fire. You're not going to get
Yeah.
the results you want.
Yeah. Okay. So have you found over the last 9 months any digestive issues?
So I'll be really honest, like my lingering symptom is digestive issues. Like I'm a type A, perfectionist, like background, over exerciser historically, right? Like over
Me too.
exerciser, over dieter, like over all the things, firstborn daughter, right? So the digestive issues are kind of the one thing that still are a stronghold for me, but I have not noticed an increase in my digestive issues. And I'll be honest, when I say digestive issues, I mean constipation. Okay, there you go. And so it has not
I appreciate that.
increased. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
It has not increased, the severity of my constipation. It also hasn't fixed it, but I haven't seen a big issue there. That's just me, N equals one. But, I've got 35 clients now, on these peptides. My husband's on these peptides. My friends are on these peptides. They're all asking, they're really asking my husband, what are you doing? And he loves to talk about his peptides. But he's a healthy man. He was a, Division 1 swimmer, college athlete, like he doesn't do anything weird to his body. He just eats well, exercises, lives his life. He did not have any side effects at all. I'd say 90% of my clients have not had any side effects at all. And we need to talk about a full dose versus a microdose here in a minute. But there are a select number of clients who have struggled with nausea. I have a fellow practitioner who, even at a really, really low dose, still had some pretty bad nausea. Some people will have transient diarrhea. Some people will have constipation. The GI issues are really like the main side effects that we will see with the GLP-1s and the GLP-1 and GIP. But at a microdose, those tend to be minimal. And again, if you're living a lifestyle that's fairly optimized, there are easy lifestyle interventions that you could do, like eating smaller meals more often, staying away from, higher fats in the diet, making sure that you're eating plenty of fiber. They seem very simplistic, but they really do work,
Okay.
when you're on some of these peptides.
Interesting. Okay, I want to ask about the fat.
Mhm.
Do you know if it's because like your body just does it make you have more diarrhea if you're eating more fats like while layering in these GLP-1s, or is it that you don't absorb them well enough? Do you know what your macros are every day in terms of how many fat grams you get?
Okay, so that's a couple questions. Let me answer first. Like everyone really is different. So it might cause nausea for some person, it might cause some diarrhea for some person. You just would have to experiment and sort of see. For like I said, for most of my circle, it's not necessarily an issue because we are taking a lower dose, like a quote microdose of the tirzepatide. Um, we know that fat is absorbed last, right? Like we digest carbohydrates in the mouth, protein in the stomach, fat in the small intestine. And so, by the time your digestion is slowed down, you might have a little bit more nausea if you are eating a higher fat diet, just because it's going to be absorbed less quickly, and can lead to some nausea. I don't know the exact mechanism of action of why fat tends to not be as well tolerated, but my theory is just, again, the body, the peptides start sending these signals to the hypothalamus that almost encourage you to eat a leaner, almost like Paleolithic diet. I'm still kind of in the early stages of this like information gathering as I watch, my clients and then my husband and my social circle, and think like, gosh, you just tend to feel better, maybe like more energized and less stomach issues when you're eating a leaner diet for whatever reason. And I think that's also, one of the ways that your body loses a little bit of weight. This is a quick caveat, but in my client population, 40-year-old, 50-year-old women, my most successful natural weight loss program is a lower fat diet. Like, women in midlife just do not thrive on higher amounts of fat anymore. So to answer your last question, my macro splits are generally somewhere between 120 and 150 grams of protein. I'm 5'11" and I exercise, regularly. So I do tend to have like a higher calorie amount, higher, macro split. So somewhere between 120 and 150 grams of protein, usually between, 150 to 250 grams of carbohydrates, just depending on if I'm training or not that day. And I find I do best if my fats are somewhere between 55 and about 70, just depending on where I'm at in my cycle. So not super high, not super low, but definitely not keto.
That's great. Yeah, yeah, not keto.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was wanted to know. I wanted to know if it was like something then you restricted like down to something, unsustainable for most women. And then not to mention women being in midlife already struggling with some hormonal issues, and you and I would know that fat supports hormone production, and we
Yes.
like I'm curious to know if the ideal was to reduce it so much, and then would it have an impact on somebody's hormones. But
Yeah, I would
55 to
never go to
70 is
that.
decent.
Yeah, and that's trial and error now for a couple of years. Again, I'm 42, like definitely in the throes of perimenopause, but still have a regular cycle. I mean, a 28 to 30-day cycle, like very well controlled, like normal bleeding, normal clotting. But I do find if I drop my fats too low, I'm just hungrier, right? So
Yeah.
keep my fats moderate, keep my carbs relatively moderate, keep my protein moderate to high, and I don't do anything too crazy with my diet anymore. Like, if I make gluten-free chocolate chip banana bread muffins, like I'm gonna eat a gluten-free chocolate chip banana bread. Like I'm not gonna restrict myself crazily like I did in my 20s and 30s, because I know the backlash and I don't want to go back to, that mental and physical kind of stronghold I was at for those couple of decades eating the
Yeah.
muffin.
Yeah, I mean, definitely like that's mental turmoil when you're restricting that much. And every
Mhm.
one of my clients and every woman I speak to in my DMs and emails, like the thing that they say, you wouldn't believe how little I eat and can't lose anything. And I'm like, ooh,
Yes.
food freedom feels so good. And yes, eating that
Yeah.
gluten-free chocolate chip banana muffin. Right? I'm the same, and I would have said like probably the exact same story. In my 20s, I owned a gym here in Toronto, and I was like, I just said it on a podcast the other day. I was the healthiest unhealthy person you would know. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like on the
Yes, I do.
outside, I was
Yes, I
lean
do.
and strong. I ate clean. I ate very little. I don't even
Mhm.
want to say like, maybe 12, 1,300 calories a day because you
Yeah.
think that that's what it is. But it's even like the metabolic backlash that,
Hmm.
creeps up on you as you approach 40 or
Hmm.
in your 40s, that you're like, all of a sudden, like, my body is not working anymore.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. I see that over and over and over and over again. That's the premise of my book, is just that we've just pushed ourselves so much that our hormones have no choice but to give up on us a little bit in our 40s. But there's hope, you can reverse that, and you've lived, and I know and I've lived, but it's a slippery slope for sure.
A
Women always
hundred
think that
percent.
more is better, and it's not.
100%, 100%. Okay, so there was something that I was reading
Mhm.
on the form you filled out
Yeah.
before you came on here, and it was for women in perimenopause. what makes peptides such a unique and promising tool to traditional hormone therapy. So
Hmm.
I want to ask about that.
Hmm.
Are you saying that it is potentially a replacement for hormone therapy?
No, not
Can you layer it
necessarily.
together? Okay.
So that is a great question. I What research has shown is that particularly for midlife women, and as you know, there's not a ton of research for anything on midlife women, but with some of these either semaglutide or tirzepatide, so GLP-1 peptides, if HRT is used at the same time, particularly estrogen replacement therapy, we tend to see weight loss also increase. So if your estrogen levels particularly are not optimized, you might not have the weight loss that your friend or neighbor had on tirzepatide. But once your estrogen is optimized with, if you need it, estrogen replacement therapy, and as a caveat, if you're on estrogen, you always want to be on progesterone as well. So really, estrogen and progesterone replacement therapy, then the tirzepatide works better for weight loss. And that is at least two studies that I've read showing that, which is really promising. If your hormones are not optimized, you won't have the same metabolic effects from some of these peptides. Now, that's not everyone in every case. There might be lots of women out there, that aren't in these studies that are still thriving, on tirzepatide or semaglutide. But it was just a very interesting set of studies to read to see that, let's be honest, most women are here for the weight loss, right? Like they're like, just give me 10 pounds, all right? And that weight loss tends to be optimized if hormones are optimized. So that's always step one for me as a practitioner. Let's run the Dutch test. Let's see what's going on with your hormones, because we don't just want to throw another, peptide medication, even supplement or diet on top of a body that is really, really struggling hormonally.
Yeah. So in your practice, if a woman were to come to you, brand new and say, Jennifer, I really want to lose weight. I'm 40 something years old and, I've tried everything and, gives you the spiel that you and
Yeah.
I've both heard many times. So you wouldn't jump to peptides from the beginning. You would say this is maybe an option down the road. Yeah. How would that process look if
Mhm.
somebody were to come work with you?
Yeah, yeah. So the program I run with my clients is 16 weeks long. We spend 6 weeks in what I call the nourish phase, right? And this is like women of our background, our clients who've just over dieted and overstressed and overexercised themselves into hormonal oblivion. I'm like, we have to eat more. You have to get your protein, your fat, your minerals. Like you have to get calories. Only then will I put them into what I call my release phase, right? And that's a 10-week process, but they've already spent a month and a half like shoring up their nutrition and their body, optimizing hormones at the same time, running the Dutch test, running the HTMA test. Once we hit that 6-week mark, they're ready and their bodies are ready to do a bit of a controlled cut. Now, most of my clients can lose their weight. Like the average for my 16-week program is 20.3 pounds of weight loss. That's naturally. All right. I know it is crazy. And it's a true cut. I mean, they're, ready for their cut at that point. They're eating less food. They're also exercising less. But if they need that extra support, it's usually around that time that I'll layer in peptides. For the women who can't afford that program or don't have the time or, don't have the inclination, the I have like a smaller program that I've created and, worksheets and ebooks that I will send out to everyone who orders peptides through me. Because sometimes I can't control it. Just find the link and they order it. I'm like, well, just make sure you're doing this, and then I've got like protein guide, fiber guide, like a lifestyle guide talking about like sun and steps and not over exercising. And at least they have the option for the
Yeah.
know-how, even if they can't implement all of it. And if you look at my social media, like I'm never going to post about peptides without saying, do the basics first. I would never just like give someone a link to order peptides unless I'm at living them, the idea to practice these foundational lifestyle habits first.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. And I love this that they can really amplify the hormone replacement therapy. Just
Mhm.
one question about that. Are we talking bioidentical hormones? Are we talking synthetic? Are we talking both?
Sure. So I really only talk about bioidenticals, like especially for estrogen, like bioidentical estrogen is hands down my favorite.
Amazing. I love that. And I just wanted to make that differentiation because
Yeah.
I don't know about in the US where you
Mhm.
are, but in Canada, it is so hard to get bioidentical hormones prescribed.
Man.
So it is so hard to find a practitioner or find a doctor
Yeah.
that will actually do the hard work in
Sure.
testing.
Mhm.
I've seen doctors layer in bioident or synthetic hormone on top of birth control for women in their 50s.
What in
And
the
I'm
world?
just like, what is happening
What in
here?
the world? Oh my
So
goodness, yes. I am,
it's
yeah.
difficult here. So I appreciate us just making the differentiation between the
Yes.
synthetic versus the bioidentical.
Oh, that's probably a whole nother podcast on synthetic versus bioidentical versus birth control. But I mean, thankfully, we do have more freedom in the States. I'm so thankful for that because it is getting easier to find practitioners. I have two I work with just like here in my town, and then a network of women practitioners, online, my telehealth company, my medical company, very, very, very knowledgeable, especially on things like the Dutch test, because not every practitioner is going to be open to running a functional lab or interpreting a functional lab. So I think that's changed a lot over the past 3 to 5 years. And again, I'm just very grateful for my own clients having that option,
Yeah,
because I
for
didn't have it.
sure.
I didn't have it 10 years ago. I remember like my doctor is like, oh, you can go on birth control and here's some Prozac. I was like, but I'm not depressed. I'm just not sleeping.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that could be a podcast in
Yeah,
itself
yeah,
about
good.
the Western medical system. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, okay, I
Hmm.
want to come back full circle to women midlife. I want
Hmm.
to talk about microdosing versus full dosing.
Hmm.
So you are currently microdosing.
Yes. Okay, this is what I've been saying on podcasts lately. There's school of thoughts on microdosing. All right. So we've got practitioners who talk about microdosing as truly tiny doses of some of these peptides, like 1 unit, 10 units. And we're talking about like a typical insulin syringe where there's like 100 units. So with tirzepatide, for example, standard dosing for someone who's using some of the peptides I'm using would be 25 units equals 2.5 milligrams. Very easy, like one-to-one correlation. And so maybe that microdosing would be 1 unit, zero point zero 0.01 milligrams, right? The company I work with defines microdosing as either 2.5 or 5 milligrams, which is still a low dose, right? In the literature, when we're studying tirzepatide, the dosing schedule starts at 2.5 milligrams, jumps to 5 milligrams, then 7.5, 10, and finally 12.5. Okay, so 12.5 being, the highest dose really that's been studied with tirzepatide. I've played around with a couple of those doses. When I started off, my doctor and my coach had me on just 10 units, so 1 milligram, right? Bumped up to 2.5, 5, tried 10 for a little bit. That was awful. I just felt it was too much. Like, I want to have an appetite. I want to eat my meals and feel like happy with my meals, right? And 10 was too high. And so bump back down to 5 and 2.5 and just play around with some of that dosing. So again, there's different school of thoughts on what a true microdose is.
Okay.
Um, uh, and you just kind of have to figure it out for yourself, I guess.
I actually really like that approach. I feel like
Yeah.
that's what you and I do in terms of herbs or supplements. Like it's about
Mhm.
titrating up to the dose that works best for somebody's bio-individual um bio-individuality,
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
right? And I guess ultimately the goal too, like if you're not some like you specifically, I don't know if your goal was 15 pounds,
Hmm.
but maybe it was just feeling better in my
Hmm.
skin. Maybe it wasn't something that you needed to, have the highest dose on to give you the maximum weight loss. Maybe it was just you just needed a bit of a hand up,
Yeah, and I'll address that very quickly. So I love what you said. Number one, with peptides, you do want the minimum viable dose, right? You don't need large amounts. So I'm usually working with my clients to figure out like what's the least amount that you could be taking to get the results you want. For me, just to bring up, what you were talking about, my results were reduction of food noise, reduction of urge to binge and purge. Those were accomplished. By nature of doing that, I lost somewhere between 8 and 14 pounds, just depending on where I'm at in my cycles, like an average, like around 10 pounds, right? And a lot of that was like midsection weight. So that was very important to me. I've had 4 babies. Like that's where I carry my weight. I was like, oh, this is great. I'm losing some of my, belly fat, right? Um, but some of the other effects for me, which I did not realize until really even a couple months ago, is my plantar fasciitis is gone. And these GLP-1s do reduce inflammation in the body. Plantar fasciitis gone, hip pain gone. Walking my 10,000 steps a day, it's kind of taxing on a 42-year-old hip. And I didn't realize like I was having some pretty serious hip pain. And then, like I said, 2, 3 months ago, I was like, I haven't felt that hip pain in 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And so, dove back into literature, looking at that inflammation research and seeing that, yes, GLP-1s can be a very powerful anti-inflammatory as well. So just a whole host of benefits that aren't necessarily just weight loss. And I think that's why so many people are starting to, open their eyes to these peptides. This is like a lifestyle kind of factor and not necessarily just a metabolic or weight loss factor.
That is incredible. Are you open to talking about cost?
Yes, absolutely. I am because they can be expensive. But, as my husband and I talk about, because he's been on his peptide stack now too, lots of things are expensive. So for me, right now, I spend $279 a month on my microdose of my GLP-1. We didn't even talk about my other peptides, but I'm also on tesamorelin and ipamorelin. That's $200 a month. I'm also on BPC 157. That's $175 a month. I am also on I'm also on NAD plus, but I'm going to get off of that just because now I'm adding in the tesamorelin and ipamorelin. And so that was about $200 a month. I cannot afford all those peptides. Like I got 4 kids. So I'm pulling back on my NAD, kind of experimenting to see what I want to do long term and the dose I want to do long term. But you can expect to spend probably like around, $500 a month if you want a couple peptides in your stack. Now, yes, that's expensive, but also we are eating out less. My husband he loves wine. He just loves wine, like everything about wine. He's like, I can only drink like a glass or two now. So he's saving, 50% on his wine costs, right? And also, I'm not experimenting with every supplement that comes my way because I feel good. My
Right.
inflammation's down, my weight's where I want it. I'm not like looking at the new like juice or pill or powder that social media is sending me. And I really am saving money on my supplements as well. And so since this is important to me, I'm making space for it in my budget, but it is an expense. I don't think it's going to be that way forever, but it is now. And then quickly, let me talk about the fact that, I do work with a telehealth compounding company right here in the States. You can order, black market, gray market peptides, which I did for a while just because, at the beginning of my journey, I was doing it all myself. I have found that those are not any cheaper than
Yeah.
working with the company I'm working with right now, which is nice because there is also physician oversight and they're already compounded for you instead of having to like figure out how much bacteriostatic water do I put in this and how many milliliters equate to a milligram and yeah,
Oh
is
my gosh,
exhausting.
that's terrifying. I
Yeah.
don't know if I would have the guts to do that from the black market standpoint, but I'm glad you touched on that for sure. I'm
Mhm.
glad you touched on that for sure. And I also really love that you were like, this is a priority for me.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to make room in my budget for it. I feel like more women need to hear that and not just about peptides, like in
Yeah.
general about your health. Like if you have 4 kids,
Mhm.
if you are not well, who's taking care of your family? Who you are pouring from an empty cup? Long term, you are going to suffer if eventually you don't put yourself first. So, pulling those resources together, whether it be for peptides or just coaching or maybe it's organic food or getting a gym membership, like whatever that might look like for
Mhm.
somebody. As women, we tend to sort of excuse our needs because everybody else needs it first. Well, I think that we need to hone in on ourselves a little bit, especially around midlife when most of the women that come to me, anxiety, depression, lack of confidence, the brain fog. They don't feel like themselves. They're losing their connections with their spouse, with their kids, on and on. So, all of these things can be improved when you start to focus in on yourself and prioritize yourself a little bit. So I did want to just say that thank you for saying that it's not necessarily something that you can afford long term, but it's a priority for you right now.
Yeah. Thanks for that reminder. And you just said it with such compassion and love. It's so true. Women, we've got a lot of shit to do. And so we just do it one thing after the other. And then we realize one day, we just don't feel like ourselves. And so it takes, I think, almost a breaking point to get to the place where you feel comfortable, or at least okay, maybe not comfortable, but okay, taking care of yourself. But it has to happen for you to feel your best and then for you to pour into the people that depend on you for sure.
100%.
Hmm.
And now I want to ask about long-term use.
Yep.
So you did say you're experimenting with what you want to do long term.
Hmm.
So do you know the safety of this kind of peptides being long term? What does that look like?
Yes. So for me personally, and I tell people this is an evolving journey, right? I'm not an expert. I haven't been doing this for years. But for me, with that very distinct reduction of food noise and the freedom from, just the thought of binging and purging, I plan to stay on a low dose of my GLP-1 GIP for a very long time. If I am like blessed with being able to access it for a long time, I will be taking advantage of that at a lower dose than I'm at right now. And I'm at a low dose right now. But again, I want to work down toward that minimum viable dose, and I'll be experimenting with that over the next 6 months. For most people, once they lose their weight, they're probably fine to go off of it or just pulse it for a period of time. I think everyone is worried about being dependent on medication. We also have to make the distinction that these, while technically have to be written as a prescription by a physician, are still proteins that are naturally found in the body. BPC 157 found in the gut, GLP-1 found in the gut and the brain. So it's a little bit different from like a carpet bomb of a traditional medication that you might be relying
Mm.
on, and more of a biochemically similar kind of compound that your body might have if we lived in a perfect world, right? So I do look at those classes of compounds differently, medications and peptides. So it feels like something more comfortable for someone to be on long term when you look at it, not necessarily as a medication. But that said, everyone just has to do their own research. Like you just have to determine what works for you. Have you come to your peptide journey eating a lot of fast food, drinking coffee and alcohol on an empty stomach, and never exercising or over exercising? Well, if you can use your time on peptides to optimize that lifestyle and build new habits, you might not need peptides, for longer than 3 months or 6 months. But if it's still hard for you to make that mental shift or even physical shift, maybe you need a little bit longer on peptides. Again, it's everyone's own bio individual journey.
I love that. And do you take them on this journey from start to finish?
So do you mean will I, or do like, can you rephrase
Like,
that? I'm sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. So somebody comes to you, they do your 16-week program, they start on some peptides, maybe 8 weeks in, and they've seen some great progress. Do you work with them long term past 16 weeks to just see them through, to help educate, to help guide, to help understand how to lower dose if they want to, how to increase dose if they want to? Do you work with them on all of that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So I do have a separate kind of coaching program for peptides. I've just got a $20 a month membership where we do a weekly coaching call and people can come and ask all of their questions. I've got, $400 program where it's monthly coaching calls and access to all of the PDFs and materials, $1,000 coaching plan where it's weekly group coaching calls and even more material. So there are ways that my clients can feel those level, like, individual levels of support, but it's not like I ever don't answer someone if they ask me a question, on their own peptide journey. And in my little town here, where we have, a lot of friends and family and whatnot, I'm out probably 2 or 3 times a week just going out and teaching people how to inject their peptides. They're like, now what? I have this needle. What do I do? And obviously I don't inject them. I'm not a doctor or a nurse, but I'm like, okay, these are the steps. Like, watch this video. I'm here to kind of make sure that you feel okay. And so it's been kind of fun too, just connecting with people in that way and answering questions if they have them.
Incredible, incredible. Is there anything else you would like to say to my audience, which is definitely in your niche as well, just around peptides and your journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. I always think of this as like a peptide curious situation, don't have any parameters or, non-negotiables in place. Just kind of be open-minded and always seek to be learning, right? At some point at the beginning was judging instead of learning. And I realized that my fear and my lack of knowledge was keeping my mind closed. And once I had the opportunity to be a little bit more open-minded, that's when a lot of things started shifting for me. And so I would just encourage, all the women out there just to be open-minded, read and gather research and look at case studies and go on Instagram and kind of learn about other people's journeys, because especially these GLP-1s are so much more than weight loss, and GLP-1s are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to peptides. So that's again a whole nother podcast, but there's just so much out there and it's just getting started. It's very exciting.
I love that, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it. I hope that my curiosity helps many of the women that end up listening to this. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I show up the most on Instagram. I'm at Jennifer Woodward Nutrition, on Facebook at the same name. My website's Jennifer Woodward Nutrition. But yeah, Instagram's probably my favorite.
Amazing. I'll make sure that that's in the show notes for everybody to go and head over and chat with you about. Otherwise, thank you so much, and we will talk soon.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
If this conversation stirred something up in you, if you feel even a little more clear, more curious, or more inspired, share it. Send it to a friend who's been quietly wondering if the way she feels is just how it is now, and tag me on Instagram or LinkedIn at @MichelleScarlett_. I truly love hearing what lands for you. And if something came up during this episode, a question, a symptom, a story, email me directly at michelle@michellescarlett.com. I personally read every message, and I'll help you get clear on what you're dealing with and what to do next. You don't have to settle. You don't have to figure it out alone. This is your space to take your health, your life, and your success back into your hands.